For those of you who just came in or for those who joined us late, thank you so much for being here. Again, I'm Beth Troutman, and I'm privileged to be here and thrilled to be asking questions. Now, this one is going to be a little different from the last for those who are joining us online. We have our one Republican candidate here for the North Carolina House seat in District 82. This is Michael Fischer. His opponent, Larry Pittman, was also offered the opportunity to be here today. He had a prior commitment. So, Michael, you'll probably end up getting more questions than our last group of people because you're going to have to answer them all. I'll try to give you a little break to get your thoughts together. But I do want you to know that we did extend the invitation to all people who are running and those who are here. We're so grateful to you. The questions that I have were submitted by local leaders, local citizens, voters, and then I came up with some of the questions myself. So hopefully we get people as informed as they need to be before they head out to vote in our primaries. We will begin with your opening statements. You can welcome everybody and tell us exactly who you are.
Well, thank you, Beth, and thank you all for being here today. And thank you to the organizers for putting this together. I think this is an excellent opportunity for the candidates to express their views and positions and get this out to the voters. This is a very short primary season. As you all know, originally the election was going to be in May and it was moved up to March the 15th. So we're all hustling to get our message out there, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here to do that today. So as Beth mentioned, my name is Michael Fischer, and I'm running to be an effective conservative voice for Cabarrus County. I am an attorney at Womble, Carlisle, Sandridge, and Rice. I practice antitrust law, and I practice that specifically for healthcare clients. Both my wife and I were born and raised here in Cabarrus County, so I understand our community's values: hard work, common sense, and humility. These were values that I learned growing up here in Concord. Ashley and I are better members of society because we grew up here, and that's why we decided that we wanted to be here to raise our family. Our son William was born last year, and we're excited for the life that he's going to have growing up in our hometown. I'm running because I want Will to have the same strong foundation that Ashley and I had growing up here. It is critically important that our leaders in Raleigh fight to strengthen both our economy and our education system. While the economy has certainly improved over the last few years, these hard-fought gains can easily slip away without strong leadership to keep us moving forward. The same can be said about our education system. And education is an issue that is deeply personal to me. I credit the public schools here in Cabarrus County for helping me become the first in my family to attend college, and I'm very proud of the years that I spent teaching in our North Carolina public schools. As your representative for the 82nd District, I will fight to support our teachers and champion our students. Whether it is improving the economy or improving our schools, I understand that there are no silver bullets in policy making. The only way to get results is through hard work, diligence, cooperation, and pragmatic reforms. I'm running for the State House because I'm eager to roll up my sleeves and get to work for Cabarrus County and North Carolina. Make no mistake, I believe that North Carolina is headed in the right direction, but we can always do better, and I intend to push us toward prosperity. I'm excited to search for the best solutions by working with folks here in Cabarrus County, whether they're elected officials, business leaders, or just average citizens, to try to find the best solutions for our local government, for our local economy, and for our local schools. The 82nd District deserves effective representation, and I'm running to provide it. Thank you for this opportunity to let me introduce myself today, and I suppose I'll have a lot of time to do that.
Yep. You're going to get to answer a lot of questions. You really are in the hot seat today. We'll try to go easy on you. I'm going to start with the same question that I asked our last candidates. What do you feel is the single most important issue here in North Carolina right now?
Well, and I'm going to somewhat hedge between what the two candidates said earlier. I think they both gave excellent answers, and I think that education and the economy are inextricably intertwined with one another. K-12 education is the largest portion of the state's budget. It deserves our utmost priority and attention to make sure that we have a school system that prepares students to go out and work and live and prosper in the 21st century. And truly, if we have an A-plus school system, we're going to have a stronger economy. And vice versa. If we grow our economy, we're going to have benefits to our school system. The two, you can't talk about one without the other. Cabarrus County, in my view, was an idyllic location to grow up for Ashley and myself because we have a sense of community here. We have a business community that works cooperatively with local government. We have kind of that synergy between economic actors, government actors, and most importantly, the schools. I'm not going to say that we have the best schools in the nation. We could here in Cabarrus County, but we have strong schools because we have strong teachers in the classroom. The reason why I attribute a lot of my success in life to the schools here in Cabarrus County is because I had teachers who supported me along the way at every level, elementary, middle, high school. I could sit here and name 20 teachers who were fantastic role models, who believed in me and who cared. And that's because we had a community that supported those teachers. It's all intertwined. And so when I go to Raleigh as the representative for the 82nd District, I'm going to fight to strengthen our economy, to bring in more businesses, to bring in more jobs, to retain the good jobs that we have here, and at the same time work to make our school systems stronger, to make sure that our students are prepared, whether they go to a traditional public school, a charter school, if they're homeschooled, or if they go to a private school. They need the best education possible. And so I can't really pick between the two because I don't see them as separate issues.
Well, let's actually expand upon education. You are a product of our public school systems. You mentioned that you actually taught in school as well, and that North Carolina, our education system used to be a big flag in our cap. Right now, we are struggling to retain teachers. We're struggling to recruit teachers. We're struggling here in Cabarrus County and Union County. As I mentioned earlier, we're in the lowest percentage of how much money we spend per student in our area. You were just talking about teacher support. How do you propose that we actually support our teachers and provide better education for our citizens in Cabarrus County so that they can be effective leaders and effective citizens and potentially, like yourself, attend college and be trained for jobs for the future?
So as I mentioned, I'm the first in my family to attend college, and I attended college on a North Carolina Teaching Fellows Scholarship. So part of the deal for me was support to go to UNC Chapel Hill, where I attended, and to then go out and be a teacher in a public high school. And I did that. And it was a wonderful experience. I worked in the Winston-Salem Forsyth Public Schools. I taught high school social studies. I taught government and politics, ironically. And let me tell you, it looks different from the other side. So I taught in the public schools. I know, I have firsthand experience what it feels like to be a teacher in a supportive environment and to be a teacher in an environment that does not receive as much support. In the couple of years that I spent in the classroom, I had some different experiences. And I will say, and I'm biased because I am a former teacher, but the studies show that the single best predictor of student achievement is the teacher in the classroom. Because the teacher in the classroom is the person who is invested in the lives of those students. It is the person who structures that student's educational experience, whether in elementary school it's for an entire day for a full year, or in my case, when I was a high school teacher, it was for 57 minutes, 5 days a week. But that teacher in the classroom has so much power and so much opportunity to make any student who comes in the room on day one leave on the last day a better, more ready, more prepared person to go out into the world. And so it is imperative that we support those teachers. And how do we do that? I think that was the question originally. How do we support the teachers? Well, first of all, we have to pay them well. No one goes into teaching to make a lot of money. No one does. And no one expects to make a lot of money as a teacher. But they expect to be paid fairly. And unfortunately, North Carolina's average teacher salary has always been below the national average. But what is truly unfortunate is, over the last decade, that gap has widened. And so I don't know if we're going to get it to the national average. We should strive for that. I don't know if we can get it beyond the national average. We should maybe strive for that too. But we should certainly shrink the gap. Because whether shrinking the gap makes a huge difference to a particular teacher, I don't know when it comes down to dollars and cents, but it certainly makes a difference when it comes to feeling valued by our state and our society for the role that teachers play in the classroom. So I think we have to increase teacher pay. I think we have to make sure that we have clear standards coming from Raleigh on what you're expected to teach. You know, I was in ed school back when No Child Left Behind was being passed. And I stayed in touch with lots of teachers here in Cabarrus County, and they told me, you know, No Child Left Behind, 6 or 7 years, it'll be gone, we'll move on to something else. And then it'll be gone and you move it to something else. Teachers have this expectation that they keep changing the rules and we have to keep adapting to it. And that's pretty disheartening. We need standards that come out that are high standards for the students but are clear standards for teachers. Because what makes a difference to a teacher in a classroom is understanding what's expected of them, understanding what is expected that you're going to teach those students, and then having tests that accurately measure whether or not your instruction was effective. So higher pay, clear standards, and finally having resources available for teachers so that they can actually implement the curriculum that's been given to them. When I've talked with teachers here in the 82nd District, and lots of my friends who are still teachers, who are still in the classroom today, what they tell me is not, Michael, I need more money. I mean, they'd like it. We all want more money. We all want a higher salary. What they tell me is, I don't have a textbook. I've been given this radically different curriculum because it changes every couple of years, and now I don't have a textbook that aligns with what I've been asked to teach. And that, to me, is ridiculous. We need to support our teachers by giving them the tools to do their jobs effectively. How do we expect extraordinary results when you don't give adequate resources? So those are the three that come to mind based on my experience.
Now, something piqued my interest that you said at the beginning of your answer, that you actually attended UNC Chapel Hill on a Teaching Fellows scholarship. How do you feel about current policies? And we don't have to stay on this. We don't want to, belabor the education issue, but the fact that programs like Teaching Fellows now will not exist because of what we are currently doing in Raleigh. The way that you attended college possibly will not be available to other potential teachers here in North Carolina.
I personally think that that's tragic. I'm a big supporter of the North Carolina Teaching Fellows program. I think that it was a unique experience, and I think that it was a value add to those folks who wanted to go out and teach in the schools. I think that it was, I understand in some ways why it was cut, but at the same time, it was an incredibly powerful recruiting tool. And it was a unique experience at the end of your first year in college to get on a bus and go around the state and see schools in the eastern part of the state, a charter school in Charlotte, to go up to the mountains. It wasn't a vacation, it was a learning experience. It was going around and understanding that this school system that we have in North Carolina, we have over 100 school systems. We have, disparate student populations across the state. I would not have understood the complexity of our education system without the Teaching Fellows program. It was an excellent opportunity for me, as someone who was the first person in my family to go to college, to give back. In in indirect and direct ways, I have gotten so much from my county and from my state, and the Teaching Fellows Program was a way for me to give back directly. And in a similar fashion, I see running for this office as a way to give back, as an act of public service, because I care so deeply about where I've come from, and I want to make sure that we have a strong environment for current and future North Carolinians.
You mentioned in your opening statements that you're currently a practicing attorney and you deal with healthcare clients. How do you
Yes.
feel about the current state of our healthcare system and availability and access for our citizens?
Well, I think we have great access insofar as there are federal laws that require access. I think that one of those unintended consequences of Obamacare is the strain on hospitals in rural areas, the strain on doctors who are not affiliated with larger practice groups, who are not affiliated with larger systems. On the federal level, when you take healthcare policy and you scramble it up, there are going to be bukus of unintended consequences. And so I don't necessarily know that access is being hampered, but I do know that it's harder for doctors to practice medicine nowadays. It is harder for our health systems to stay in the black nowadays. And what I see as a practicing attorney in the healthcare industry is there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a great deal of uncertainty because of the disruptive policies, I'm being diplomatic, from our federal government.
We're going to move on to transportation and urban development. I'll give you time to wet your whistle a little bit. I know it's a lot of talking. How do you feel about transportation and the growing transportation needs that we face in our area as our population grows? How would you fund things like new roadways, new highways, mass transit? You've currently, I'm sure, heard about the toll road issues that are happening along I-77. And the idea that the light rail should come into Cabarrus County. How do you feel about mass transit coming into our area? And how would you plan to fund these initiatives?
Well, I'll say from the outset that transportation is not an issue that I've had to deal with other than being stuck in traffic, often on I-85 and often in Harrisburg and often in the western part of Cabarrus County. You know, the district that I'm seeking to represent, the 82nd District, is a high-growth area. Harrisburg is growing at an amazing rate. Western Cabarrus County is growing at an amazing rate. And so we have to have a transportation policy that keeps up with this need, with this growing demand for effective and efficient transportation from point A to point B. And so I think it has to be a high priority. I think it has to be simplified in a lot of ways. You know, I have been following the I-77 toll debacle, and it's so opaque. When you start looking at the issues at first, it's hard to figure out how did we get ourselves in this situation. When you have regional organizations, you have the state government, it seems like everybody's just passing the potato around, the hot potato around, and where is the ultimate accountability? I think that we need simplification in terms of how we implement our transportation policy so that we can have more effective and efficient results than the mess that we have now.
Would you support extending the light rail into Cabarrus County?
I know that the light rail has been somewhat successful in Charlotte. I know in the south part of Charlotte, many of my colleagues, many of the folks who work in Uptown, use it on a daily basis, and when I see it, it's very full. I haven't studied the economic impact to see if it's a good value. And to me, with any issue, as a fiscal conservative, it comes back to value. Are we getting bang for our buck on a project like light rail. And so I would need to study that and understand whether it is worth it from a dollars and cents perspective.
Certainly, and I asked this question earlier. People view what's going on in Raleigh as a very polarizing environment. They feel that there is a big divide along party lines. As a leader, how would you help heal that? How would you help increase communication and maybe get more communication happening and make people feel that Raleigh is a less polarized place?
Right. I would look to what we've done here in Cabarrus County and try to export that to Raleigh. I don't know if you're aware of this, but here in Cabarrus County, our elected officials from every municipality, from the county level, they meet once a quarter to talk about the issues that are confronting their different constituencies. Our local officials have put together this process and set it up so that it's not a confrontational issue. There is communication planned from the beginning. We're going to come together. We're going to talk through issues. We might not agree, but we know we're going to have that opportunity in that forum. And so I think that in order to cool down the hot language in Raleigh, to cool down the polarization, you have to work at it. You have to have from the beginning an intentional, purposeful means of bringing people together and talking. You have to just do it. You have to encourage it. You have to value it. And I personally value collaboration and communication. You can't be a teacher. You can't be a lawyer. You can't be, any profession. You can't do anything all by yourself. I guess you could be a day trader and just sit at home in your bathrobe. But in the 21st century, everybody has to work with one another. And so, I'm going to go to Raleigh and talk to people who I don't agree with and people who I do agree with and try to just understand different people's perspectives. I don't think you can change it overnight. There is no silver bullet, but you have to be intentional about it and you have to just do it.
Sticking along those lines of communication and what's going on in the General Assembly actually voted to take Asheville's water system and put it under control of a regional authority. The Asheville City Council was actually opposed to this idea, and now this issue is currently in the courts. And similarly, they also voted to take Charlotte's airport away from the city of Charlotte, which was an issue the Charlotte City Council actually opposed. How do you feel about these types of votes, especially when the city's elected officials oppose the measure?
I'm a Republican. I have been all my life, and I've always understood Republicans to favor local control. So it's one of those issues that perplexes me that a Republican General Assembly in these instances and instances that you mentioned in the earlier discussion, take away from local governments. That's not my approach. I think that local government, that those folks who are elected by people who live in the community, they have a better sense of what is right for that community. So I do not know much about the Asheville. Obviously, with the Charlotte Airport, have followed that more closely. But I'm very skeptical of Raleigh taking authority and taking control from local governments.
And an issue that's timely today, because a trial began today. In 2013, a Republican-led General Assembly actually changed election laws to include a requirement that voters show a state-approved voter identification card at their polling places in order to be eligible to cast their vote. A trial, like I said, begins today ahead of the March primaries, and some argue that this ID requirement disproportionately affects minority voters who may not have access to the documents needed to get the ID cards. How do you feel about this voter ID requirement? And certainly in 2015 it was amended to say that they can show a reasonable impediment. But how do you feel about this with the idea of current voter fraud, realistic statistics?
Right. So I applaud the General Assembly for taking measures to combat any kind of voter fraud. I can't buy a soda at the store without showing my driver's license. I think that if we're going to show up to vote, showing a driver's license, showing one of 5 other IDs, or submitting an affidavit stating that there was some sort of reasonable impediment to getting an identification is sound public policy. Now, what's going to happen with the trial in Winston-Salem? I don't know. And so I'll watch that and see. And it's up to the federal courts at this point, and this will certainly be appealed whichever way it comes out, to give further guidance on whether North Carolina's law comports with federal law.
How do you feel about the money that gets spent as these types of measures go through our court system?
Well, I think that litigation often is the only way to get a definitive answer on whether a particular law is constitutional. And so while there are transaction costs, and while I don't want to spend money when we don't have to, if you want to get finality and if you want to know where the rules are, sometimes you have to invest in that litigation in order to find that finality.
Now, earlier I asked a question about an issue that is often polarizing, about gun violence, and how to curb the current gun violence that we are seeing across our nation to help people feel like they're safe in our malls, like the shooting that happened at North Lake Mall, safe in our schools, safe when we go out to run an errand. What would you as a leader do, and how would you communicate with your constituents about gun violence?
Well, in terms of gun violence, I think that there are a number of issues at play. One thing that I will say, in my view, is not an issue is a law-abiding citizen's constitutional right to own firearms. I believe the Second Amendment is clear that individuals who are law-abiding citizens have a constitutionally protected right to own firearms. But I will say that issues that are at play here are law enforcement issues. And as was mentioned earlier, law enforcement is not going to be able to solve the problem 100% of the time. They can't be everywhere, and we don't want law enforcement everywhere. So we need to make sure that we support our police and our sheriffs and our state troopers so that they have the support so that they can do their jobs well. I think that a core issue is the identification of mental health issues and treating those folks with serious mental health issues. And that becomes a policy issue that can be solved. There are efforts going on today to help identify and treat those with mental health issues and to help identify potentially problematic issues that could lead to gun violence. So, for example, here locally, Cardinal Innovations Healthcare Solutions, which is our local behavioral health managed care organization, has been recently training folks for emergency situations, helping them to identify those folks who might be at risk for perpetuating some sort of gun violence. The National Council for Behavioral Health has made it its goal to train 1 million people in mental health first aid. These are reasonable responses that are targeted toward the real problem, which is those folks who have severe mental health issues that can lead to gun violence. And the last issue that I would bring up, there are, I think cultural issues at play in terms of gun violence. And I've seen this, throughout my life. And a lot of it comes with technology. We have become a society of radical individuals. We have become a society where our children sometimes sit at home and play video games that are desensitizing them to gun violence. That's their right, and that's the parents' right to decide whether or not their children can engage in such behavior, but it's also our role as parents and as community members to make sure that our students know that that might not be the only pro-social behavior. And that, I don't know how the legislature could even start to address. But mental health issues, I think the legislature can support those efforts like those with Cardinal Innovations, like those with the National Council for Behavioral Health.
Along those lines of mental health issues, just to expand a little bit, would you support more extensive background checks to make sure that weapons don't end up in the hands of people who might have a criminal past or an issue that might lend itself to gun violence?
I'm not an expert on the background check process. I do know that when I was applying for my concealed carry permit, that there was a pretty rigorous background check process for that, and I know that local health providers, local managed care organizations like Cardinal Innovations, they are part of the process in the background check, and I think that that is appropriate, but I would have to study more to know if that should be expanded or not.
Let's move on to jobs. Of course, a very important issue for folks. Let's talk about the current state incentives program and what you would do as a legislator to create jobs, to help people get jobs and maintain jobs. And then, like we did in our the last question and answer period with our last candidates, also we can talk about tax redistribution here as well.
So I think that it is imperative that our state government be given the flexibility to recruit new businesses to Cabarrus County and to the state of North Carolina. I think it's imperative for our local governments to have that flexibility as well. And so I am supportive of efforts to extend incentive programs at the state level because I think that that's a powerful tool in the toolbox. It's not going to be necessary in every case. It's not going to be necessarily effective in every case. But on a case-by-case basis, I think that our state needs the ability to use incentives when that is a determining factor for that business that's deciding whether it wants to relocate here to Cabarrus County or to North Carolina generally. And so I will say that, again, value matters to me. I would never be in favor of a program to just throw money away, to just give a bag of money to someone and say relocate and come on over. But if you structure an incentive package properly, if you put in clawbacks, for example, if you put in contractual conditions that require the company to deliver on its part, if it brings the jobs, if it adds buildings to the local tax rolls, and if the business doesn't, then they never see $1. They never see one bit of a grant. I've read some of these contracts recently. They're pretty short. They're like 5 pages. You can read them, and you can see very clearly in these contracts, if you don't build the building, if you don't bring the jobs, if you don't do this, you get nothing. And if you break a condition in the future, we can take back any kind of incentive that you got in the past. There should not be any incentive program, in my view, that puts the taxpayer at risk. It can truly be a win-win, and it can be the determining factor in some cases and in not. Therefore, we need the flexibility to use it when it's appropriate. And the second question was on
tax redistribution. Yeah, we're almost out of time, so we can just touch on that one shortly.
Sure. My view is that sales tax redistribution is very curious from a Republican General Assembly. I am a fiscal conservative. I have never understood fiscal conservatism to mean redistributing anything. And so here in Cabarrus County, we have worked hard to have a successful, vibrant local economy. We have spent a lot of money to attract businesses here and to pay for the infrastructure for Concord Mills, for example. And so if folks want to come here and spend their hard-earned dollars, we still have to maintain that infrastructure. We still have to police Concord Mills. We still have to expend a great deal of money to keep our engine going. And so it makes very little sense to me to take sales taxes that are generated here in Cabarrus County and give them to another county that frankly isn't going to know what to do with them. And so it is highly offensive to me, in fact, to rob Peter to pay Paul.
All right. You made it through the whole question process. You've said a lot, but if you have a closing statement you would like to offer as well, now's the time.
Sure. So once again, I just want to mention I'm running for this seat because I care deeply about this community. You know, Ashley and I grew up here. We had a great childhood. We're really excited that our children are going to have a fantastic childhood. And so what drives me is making this community better and making this state better. You know, I have been given a lot from North Carolina. I have tried to repay that, and I'm going to continue to try to repay that by working hard in Raleigh on behalf of those who live in the 82nd District. I don't have all the answers, but I have an open door, and I have a telephone that I'll always answer. You might have to leave a voicemail, and I'll call you back because the baby doesn't sleep well, so I might be napping. But I don't think that I'm going to have all the answers, and I know that no one in this room individually has all the answers, but together we can make our state and our county a more prosperous place, a place that others want to come and live and work and stay. And I would appreciate your vote on March the 15th. Ashley earlier reminded me, ask for the vote. So March 15th is going to be here 7 weeks from tomorrow. It'll be here before we know it. So if you would be so kind as to vote for me on March the 15th, I would appreciate it, and I look forward to getting to work for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael Fischer. We'll take a really brief break as we bring our next candidate up, who will be Representative Linda Johnson from District 83.